Please welcome to the stage Kelly Becker, President UK and Ireland at Schneider Electric, and Rashmi Ghai, Global Head of Sustainability and ESG at Citi Commercial Bank, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Duncan.
Good morning, everyone. So we have a very exciting conversation ahead of us. Today, I think what we're going to be covering really is some of the complexities around the ESG landscape and the shrinking net zero timeline really demand collaboration to drive meaningful progress. So over the next 25 minutes, we're really looking at how large multinationals can leverage their resources to accelerate these efforts to the vital middle market. And I'm delighted to be joined today to have this discussion with two experts in Kelly and Rashmi. So welcome. And we're going to be looking to highlight the role that big businesses can play in helping this important mid-market companies meet their decarbonization goals and integrate sustainability into their business models. So, as our conversation is focusing on the challenges of integrating sustainability into the middle market, I think a really good place for us to start to drive some clarity for the room, Rashmi, is really how would you define the middle market, and how do you define that at Citi? And what challenges are you seeing within this group, because it's quite a large group, as they work to decarbonize?
Thank you, Duncan, for the question. Good morning, all. So at Citi, we define mid-market clients as clients that are making annual revenue of between 10 million and $3 billion. And our primary focus is really to lean into our strengths as a truly global bank and industry alignment and expertise to focus on clients that are fast-growing and international-oriented. So think of a digital platform started in Europe that's wanting to be globally present in very quick succession and has growth plans. And Citi Commercial Bank is an integral part of Citi's global strategy. It's a key engine of growth. You saw the video just before that. And our propositions, for them really cut across all the product suites as well. And in coming to the definition, I see them in two parts. It's a big market. Often our clients, especially as you go towards the developing markets, sit in the value chain of biggest corporations. And they are not maybe the face of the industries, but they're definitely the driving engine of a lot of these industrial companies, consumer companies, and they're sitting in those value chain. And when you talk about emissions, from that perspective, we know the emissions, the Scope 3 emissions in the value chains are 11 times more. So really, if you think about decarbonization, there's no real way to decarbonize the global economy without really decarbonization efforts of these mid-market players. And the other part of the definition of the mid-market is it really is also the hub of innovation. You're seeing a lot of sustainability disruptors coming from this market, and it's across sectors. There isn't one where you're not seeing businesses coming out that are focusing on solving the sustainability challenges. But if you name the few, if you think about the renewable value chain, right? It's not just the solar plant at the end, that everything goes behind it and then after it to actually service the grids and so on. You think about the EV supply chain, value chain, but also a lot of circular economy, no waste business models are driving a lot of innovation in this sector as well. And I think the challenges to your question, right? So the clients that are in the value chain, challenges for them are very much uncertainty around where to start, right? Where to focus and prioritize within the ESG considerations, what steps to take next. And you have to remember they're doing this while grappling with the headwinds of the macroeconomics, right? This higher interest rates, their cost of capital issues, there's supply chain issues, especially in the labor market, with the political instability that also causes issues with the trade corridors. So they're doing this, and they are thinking about how best to manage their stakeholders that are increasingly demanding more disclosures, more reporting around the ESG metrics. So I'd say that's their biggest challenge, where to start. They are, I would say, when I spend more and more time with them across the globe, they're all thinking about it. They're all thinking about the transition and how they can improve their environmental and social practices. But it's not necessarily always comes the top of the priority yet, because they're thinking about all this in the context. And in terms of the sustainability disruptors, their challenges are similar to other fast-growing companies, where it's access to capital, competition, resources, growth that they want to find in different markets. And a bank like us, really can help them provide spectrum of solutions. It doesn't need to be labeled sustainability, really, right? It's your liquidity management solutions, your payments, your corridors for trade, working capital improvements. And obviously, if it's focused on sustainability matters, helps us because we are helping them expand their positive impact across borders by unlocking structured solutions for capital. So that's how I think about it. But long answer, but that's how we think about the market.
No, I think it's what's really what you framed as well is the complexity because of the size and scale, geographical industry. There's so many different factors. So Kelly, thinking how do you at Schneider Electric, how do you navigate some of those challenges, I guess, where there's so many companies at varying stages of that journey. So how do you approach this work?
I think it comes in a lot of different formats, quite frankly. And at Schneider, we're very focused on our own sustainability. And part of being able to talk to clients about how do they actually evolve and decarbonize is being able to do it ourselves. So that was, I would say, sort of step one from the company's perspective. How do we help our top 1,000 suppliers decarbonize, our scope 3 emissions, everything focused on us, because we need to then go out and help our clients. From a mid-market perspective, it varies so differently and a little bit different from Rashmi. I would say, sometimes we're dealing with companies, very small SMEs that are 5 employees, all the way up to sort of the broader definition. And their capabilities, their structure, their ability to reference these topics varies vastly. What's exciting about SMEs and the mid-market is they can often move faster than large corporates who are, I would say, under much greater scrutiny from both investors, shareholders, their own employees, quite frankly. And so for us, we're trying to look at where do you even start? This is the big topic. How do you start? How do you get somebody interested? How do you convince them that actually spending a little bit of money to get moving is the place to go? I really always think about it that the less energy used, the better you're off you are. So don't use it in the first place. Not only affects your utility bill, but it also just helps you get moving. So we start with the topic of energy efficiency. Dependent on where in the mid-market a customer falls, there's so many different segments. So mid-market for a building like we're sitting in today versus mid-market for a cement plant are going to be very different. And so we try and get pretty clear on what are those kinds of solutions, and really start at this topic of what are those easiest things you can start to address. You have to start the journey, I think.
Yeah. So in that journey, is that about also getting the right people in the room to have those conversations? Because they can be very different.
Absolutely. And I think both, quite frankly, large corporate customers as well as more of the mid-market, the right people in the room very much varies, depending on a structure, on decision-making. Sometimes you might be having the conversation with a plant manager. And that is the decision maker. They understand the business the most. They understand, in fact, where are they using energy? What do they want to do? What equipment's going to fail pretty soon? And in other places, you're speaking to the CFO of a Fortune 500 because that's where the decision making starts. So That's the fun of sales, I think, quite frankly, is also figuring out who is that decision maker. And it's a bit of a balance, I think, between the financials and the environmental and the sort of sustainability corporate good side. And you have to find those people who care about all of it. That's the right decision maker usually.
So, and you've kind of touched a little bit there on collaboration. What does that look like to be a great collaboration partner for your...
Rashmi and I were talking about this a little bit in the green room. So I would say, 10 years ago, the company's approach to collaboration stroke partnership was very different than it is today. And I think that's because the challenges are quite different. The scope of the problem of the world, if you will, around climate change is massive. And so even companies like ours who lead on this front, right? Sustainability is at the core of what we do. Have to partner with everybody because we don't have every solution. I think the other thing that's changing a lot is it's not just technology providers like ourselves. It's banks, it's governments, it's this whole private-public partnership approach. Locally, we're having a lot of conversations with the City of London as an example. How do they intend the next 10 years to decarbonize? What is that going to look like? And that's a public-private partnership approach, because I think everybody's recognizing no single place has all the solutions to the topic.
Well, and obviously it's super important because the middle market represents such a huge chunk, if not the majority of the supply chain. Yep. So it holds such great importance of everyone getting it right. Is everyone leaning in and collaborating effectively?
I think everyone is a broad description, but certainly I've been at Schneider on and off for almost 20 years and sort of two different stints, and never in my career since sort of this post-COVID have people been so focused on sustainability and decarbonization and climate change. Yeah. It's clearly the sort of topic of our, I think, broadly our same generation. But I think, their governments have an enormous role to play because what they're doing for the mid-market is also providing supports. Yeah. So large corporations, the expectation is you should figure out, I think, how to do it yourself. That's you have those resources. Mid-markets and then local governments and how they actually go about implementing and helping people in the mid-market. There's a huge role for governments to play, and we're seeing that more and more, I think, across the world.
For sure. Rashmi, I think another key piece of this is also how you focus on driving both sustainability and returns. And I think you could argue sustainability as well, both environmentally, but also business sustainability, that you need to be evolving because otherwise your options are going to be limited. But how do you think about helping your clients in terms of scaling their sustainability efforts, but also driving business value at the same time? And are there some examples that you can share where that's happened?
Yeah, as a large global financial institution, our clients, especially at the mid-market, and going to the topic of uncertainty around knowing, they look at us for insights, what's happening around the markets, what are their peers doing, what is the sector doing, what is their competition doing, and where do they sit in the whole transition ecosystem, and how can they take benefit of their business models from returns perspective, right? So to bring it to life, think about a client that's thinking about a climate solution project in the US, and there happens to be an IRA there. Could they be thinking about some sort of tax credit reliefs, and they could be thinking about some liquidity events up front that could help them do that. If they're thinking about creating a better framework around their supply chains, could they be thinking about sustainable supply chain financing solutions that bank can help them with, where you can peg the financing and reduce the cost of financing their suppliers linked to the sustainability attributes. So there are solutions that they are seeing from a risk and reward perspective, right? And I think we are marshalling our efforts really, especially in the mid-market, because it's so important to start early in these, to think through how does sustainability initiatives help your top line revenue growth? How does it help with cost efficiencies, to your point? The plant manager actually knows this is a good thing for me to do. Forget about its sustainability. It's just going to get me better ROI because it's a good CapEx investment. Same thing, how does it create value in the business as a business valuation? Cost of capital is another one. How are investors looking at it as you're thinking about events in the market, both in equity and debt side? So I think there are multiple ways in which we are speaking to them. And I think you touched on this. I think collaboration, the government and the public sector in general, I think, have a very critical role to play here when you talk about returns in specific, right? Because let's be honest, we want to drive capital more towards developing markets and where it's needed the most, and where it's mid-market, their credit quality might not be there. And we do have to partner with like multilateral banks, like Asian Development Bank or DFIs, and we do actively at Citi. And I'll give a couple of examples to just bring it to life. So, for example, just a few months ago, we've issued the first plastic bond, collaborating with World Bank, in which one of our clients is called Plastic Collective, based out of UK. It's very much an NGO. Will be helped expanding their plastic recycling efforts in Indonesia and emerging markets, right? We couldn't do that if World Bank wasn't to upfront offtake that, right? The same thing, if you think about businesses in Korea, I was there last month, where they are trying to expand their supply to the EV, electric vehicle OEMs. And you partner with export agencies like K-Shore to help them get that trade flow working towards in Europe. And the one last one I'd mention is, and again, quite an exciting space, we just did the industry first securitization facility and we secured off-grid solar receivables, and these receivables are in an Africa space for a client called Sun King. So we are not just helping go towards more clean energy, but it's really essential basic services for a very large continent in Africa that enabled this large-scale facility. And we could only do this because we invited DFIs into the facility, and we had this as a syndicated facility who had much more appetite to take that risk in the region and the government. So I think the blended finance piece is quite an important one to keep thinking about. And definitely, I think for the mid-market clients, it has to make sense from a risk and opportunities perspective first, before they start to take any proactive actions around reporting and adopting different metrics and so on.
I think, though, Duncan, the other thing that is enabling a lot of this is data.
Yeah.
So we're at a really different place now than even 5 years ago around the systems in the market, what they can supply. Because if you're a bank, you want to understand your ROI. And obviously, Rashmi is the expert here. But from our side, the system, software orientation of so many products on the market give that data to any customer on the market if it's in their facilities. And so I think that is really helping people to understand, if I do this, it gives me this result, and I can show it via data. If I do this, it gives me this result. And that's, I think, also how we're able to help people get started, is that you can see a tangible result. You also mentioned electric vehicles. I think we're seeing enormous growth in both electric vehicles and electric infrastructure. It's one of the easiest things to explain to people around decarbonization. And I use the example a lot because so many people go, I don't even know what you're talking about. Oh, you drive that electric vehicle over there. Okay, let's talk about what that actually really means for the grid. What does it mean for your home? What does it mean for your business? What does it mean every time you drive on the streets of London or New York or wherever? And we have to make those kinds of examples easier, I think, for people to understand, especially in the mid-market, where they don't have a head of sustainability on their staff, and they probably aren't going to. How do we help people understand this is a place to start and move from?
I think it helps as well, and data helps bring everyone together and that understanding. How, just going back and I guess focusing on returns and also accelerating our efforts, are there any areas of technology that are helping to accelerate performance that you talk about? I mean, obviously you've mentioned EVs as a good example to help people understand, but are there any other things that you're excited about from the technology stance?
I mean, I think the power of software at this point, and quite frankly, when you look at the systems that are on the market, I mean, the app that runs your house all the way up to, things that run a nuclear plant. And the innovation and the pace and the speed at which those sorts of things are changing, I think is really driving and accelerating us forward in a way I certainly haven't seen. And I think that in some ways makes things pretty accessible. Schneider's bread and butter is a electrical infrastructure, electrical breaker, right? Nobody, I have to explain to my parents what that is, right? So people, if you're not in our world, that's not really what you're talking about, but you absolutely understand, I have this app and it shows me that I used less electricity last month, or certainly some of the large utilities and retailers are doing very interesting stuff to drive local engagement with their customers. So I think the technology is just, and the software orientation of that is really enabling us to think in a different way.
I mean, technology is definitely an enabler across the sectors, really, to decarbonize, right? I mean, I'll give some examples. Data. I mean, think about the amount of technology companies out there helping carbon footprinting, carbon accounting, carbon data, mapping to your point to be able to see what you're doing. But also some really unique business models. I have some clients that are thinking about putting a lot of the supply chain data that you have on blockchains. So that just creates an open API, so you have transparency of what's happening the first mile, really, at the small farmer holders level. But, I think the technology as the base to enable a lot of the solutions that are out there, even circular economy. We have clients that are thinking about circulating luxury brands or clothes or textile or even paper or electronics. How do you enable that? These are tech companies, digital platforms that are really making that happen. So I think I see technology as like enablement for a lot of these business models that are focusing on sustainability initiatives.
So I think in our last couple of minutes, and as we're all very focused on progress, I just wanted to ask you both, to close this off, how do you both measure success and progress at your companies, and what's the most important KPI or data point that you look at? And I'm sure there are multiple, but is there one that you hold closer to you to help kind of chart?
I mean, we, and it's public, we measure our sustainability index. I actually think my personal opinion on this is that one of the biggest things that has driven and changed us as a company is that pretty much every employee, part of their compensation is tied to our sustainability index. And that includes much broader than the word sustainability. It's our gender and diversity index. And, it's a conglomeration of a bunch of things. But to me, when employees have a real personal component of their pay, it definitely helps drive, I think, the company culture and where people focus and drive. And certainly for us, that's meant business results that have followed on from that very positively.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, at Citi, we have all sorts of metrics. We have our net zero target, we have our $1 trillion sustainable finance goals, but taking it to a business, which is where I run my team, I think about it as objectives. What are our objectives in the business when you think about sustainability? And they're twofold. The first one, we want to be trusted transition partners to all of these value chain mid-market players, help them facilitate, finance their transition activity, bring them the best insights and the market knowledge. And then the other one is, really help support, grow this sustainability disruptor piece, which is a growing part of our portfolio, and help them scale their own positive impact across the borders and unlock that through structured capital solutions, as I gave some examples on. And in terms of the metrics, right, so it's volume of financing that we are doing, the amount of sustainability disruptors we have across sectors, what type of transaction are we able to lead with them. And then just two other things I'd want to mention, and you touched on, is, there's no one one institution that can accelerate this, right? So the idea of us collaborating and partnering across our ecosystems, be it public sectors, everybody in the firm, not just me, is thinking about how do we speak to our multilateral banks? What do we do with the governments? What do we do with the agencies? What do we do policymakers? So I think we do need that ecosystem, and we continuously drive that as a metric as well. And the last one, which again, all of our employees, to your point, we need to get them along on this journey with us and make sure they are adopting that sustainability mindset as well.
Thank you. I think that brings us pretty much to time. Thank you so much for joining us, Kelly and Rashmi. I think it's been a really, really great conversation and highlights the importance of the middle market. And so thank you also for all of your work in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.